Venus in the Signs Intro. Today we're starting a series on Venus in the Signs. Venus is usually described as love, attraction, beauty, and money. That's correct, but incomplete. In a chart, Venus shows how you relate to what you want. It describes your instinct for connection, your taste, your way of giving and receiving, and the kind of experiences that feel worth having. It also shows how you handle pleasure, how you attach value to people and things, and how easily you allow yourself to enjoy what is already available. This is why Venus is not only about relationships. It's about preference. It's about selection. It's about what you move toward and what you quietly reject. Two people can want love, but mean completely different things by it. One may need directness and movement, another needs stability and time. One is drawn to stimulation, another to calm. That difference is not random. Venus explains it. The sign Venus is in shows how that instinct operates. It changes the pace, the tone, and the expectations. Some Venus placements move quickly and lose interest just as fast if there is no response. Others take their time and only open when something proves itself. Some respond to words, others to consistency, others to presence, others to intensity. The same applies to money and value. Venus describes what you consider worth investing in, what you naturally attract, and where you may either overextend or hold back. It often shows where things come easily and where they become complicated because your sense of value is not aligned with reality yet. In the natal chart, the sign gives the style, the house shows the area of life, and the aspects modify how smoothly or intensely Venus operates. So this series focuses on the sign first. We're going to look at how Venus behaves in each sign, how it approaches attraction, what it responds to, what it avoids, and where it tends to create both ease and problems if it's not understood properly. No cliches, no simplified labels, just how the placement actually works. Venus in Pisces. Venus in Pisces does not approach love logically. This is a Jupiter and Neptune-ruled Venus, which means attraction is tied to feeling, imagination, and emotional openness. It doesn't move through clear structure or evaluation first. It moves through resonance. Does this feel right? Does this feel meaningful? Does this feel like something more than what it appears to be? If the answer is yes, the connection can deepen quickly. Now, this is one of the most receptive Venus placements. It does not need a lot of external proof to feel something. It can sense. It can imagine. It can project possibility. That is both its strength and its complication. Because Venus in Pisces does not just see what is there. It also sees what could be there. And sometimes those two things are not the same. Now, attraction here often begins with emotion. A moment. A look. A feeling that something is familiar, even if it is new. There is usually a softness to it. A sense of openness. This is not a placement that builds attraction through structure or time first. It builds through feeling. Now, one of the strengths of Venus in Pisces is empathy. It can understand others deeply. It can feel what is not being said. It can connect in a way that is compassionate and intuitive. This makes it capable of very deep emotional bonds. But the shadow is lack of boundaries. Because when you feel everything, it becomes harder to separate your own experience from someone else's. Now, let's talk about how this placement shows affection. It is often gentle, supportive, understanding, emotionally available. It may express love through presence, through listening, through being there without needing anything in return. There is often a giving quality, wanting to help, wanting to care, wanting to support. But this is also where imbalance can happen. Giving without receiving, staying when something is not actually healthy, seeing potential instead of reality. Now, the humor of Venus in Pisces is subtle, because this placement can see the beauty in situations that are clearly complicated. There can be moments where everyone else sees the problem, and Venus in Pisces sees the meaning, which is beautiful, and sometimes slightly unrealistic. Now, one of the main challenges here is clarity, because this placement does not always want to define things. It prefers to feel them. But without definition, confusion can grow. Not always immediately, but over time. Now, in relationships, Venus in Pisces needs emotional connection, not just communication. not just structure, emotion. If that is not present, the connection feels empty, even if everything else looks correct. Now, in long-term relationships, this placement can be very devoted. It can stay through difficulty. It can support deeply, but it needs boundaries, because without them, it can give too much. And over time, that leads to imbalance. Now, let's talk about attraction patterns. This placement can sometimes be drawn to what needs healing. Not intentionally, but naturally. There is a desire to understand, to help, to connect on a deeper level. But that can lead to situations where the connection is based more on potential than reality. So part of the development is learning to see clearly, not just feel deeply. Now, let's bring this into money and value. Venus in Pisces often values experience over structure, feeling over calculation. There can be generosity, spending based on emotion rather than planning. The strength is openness. The shadow is lack of boundaries. So again, balance. Now, in terms of self-worth, this placement is fluid. It can rise and fall depending on emotional state, because it feels deeply. So part of the development is stabilizing that sense of value, not letting it shift entirely based on feeling. Now, one of the best qualities of this placement is compassion. It brings softness into connection. It allows understanding where others might judge. It creates emotional depth. But when it is not conscious, it can lose itself. Too open, too giving, too willing to overlook reality. So the key for Venus in Pisces is not to become more rigid. It is to become more clear within its openness. To keep the empathy, but add boundaries. To keep the feeling, but include reality. To keep the connection, but not dissolve into it completely. Because when that happens, this placement becomes one of the most deeply connected in the chart. It is not just love. It feels, and it brings a level of emotional understanding that few placements can match. There's also something important about Venus in Pisces that becomes clearer with time. This placement does not only fall in love with a person, it often falls in love with a feeling, a mood, a possibility, a sense that something meaningful is happening beneath the visible level of the connection. That is why attraction here can feel immediate and difficult to explain. It is not always based on logic. Sometimes it is based on atmosphere, how someone feels to be around, what opens emotionally in their presence, what the connection seems to promise without ever fully saying it out loud. And that can be beautiful, but it can also make discernment harder, because Venus in Pisces does not only respond to what is real, it also responds to what feels symbolic. A relationship can start to carry meaning very quickly. It can feel faded, healing, spiritual, like something larger than the obvious reality of two people getting to know each other. Sometimes that intuition is right. Sometimes it is projection. And one of the deepest lessons for this placement is learning the difference between the two. Now, another thing about Venus in Pisces is that it often has a very unusual tolerance for emotional complexity. It can sit with contradiction. It can understand mixed motives, conflicted feelings, messy situations, where another placement might pull back and say this is too unclear. Venus in Pisces may stay longer, feeling that there is still something worth understanding. That compassion is one of its gifts, but it can also become a trap, because understanding someone is not the same as being safe with them. Feeling for someone is not the same as being able to build a life with them. And this placement often has to learn that love is not proved by how much confusion it can absorb. It is proved by whether the connection is mutual, honest, and strong enough to hold both people in a real way. There is also something about timing here. Venus in Pisces can enter emotionally before the structure exists, before the conversation has clarified what this is, before the pattern of behavior has shown whether the other person is consistent, before reality has had time to catch up with feeling. That can create magic. It can also create disappointment, because if the heart arrives long before the facts, it becomes easy to attach to what might be rather than what is actually happening. So one of the most important developments for this placement is learning to let feeling and reality move closer together. Not shutting down intuition, just slowing it enough to see clearly. Now, another layer here is emotional permeability. Venus in Pisces often takes in more than it intends to. The tone of the room, the sadness in another person, the longing underneath someone's words, the ache in a situation that has not been resolved. This placement can feel all of that without needing it to be explained. That sensitivity gives it extraordinary compassion, but it can also create exhaustion, because without boundaries, everything starts to get inside. And once everything gets inside, it becomes harder to tell what belongs to the self and what belongs to someone else. That is why boundaries are not a small lesson here. They are essential, not to make the placement less loving, to make the love sustainable. There is also a very distinct romantic instinct in Venus in Pisces. It wants to soften what is harsh, heal what is wounded, protect what is fragile, bring grace into spaces where other people might become practical or cold. That impulse can make this one of the most moving Venus placements. There is real tenderness here, real generosity, a willingness to meet people where they are emotionally, even when they are not at their best. But again, that generosity needs form. Otherwise, it can become self-erasure. And that is often the turning point for this placement. Learning that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. Learning that care does not require confusion. Learning that being open-hearted does not mean being endlessly available to what drains you. Now, one of the things Venus in Pisces does especially well is emotional atmosphere. This placement understands how a connection feels, not just what it is. It knows when there is softness, when there is ache, when there is longing, when there is distance even if nobody has named it. That makes it incredibly perceptive in intimate situations. But it can also mean it responds to emotional weather more than facts. If the feeling is beautiful, it may stay. If the feeling is painful but meaningful, it may stay even longer. So another part of growth is asking a very simple question more often. What is actually happening here? Not what could happen. Not what this reminds me of. Not what I hope this becomes. What is happening now? That question protects this placement more than almost anything else. There is also something important about how Venus in Pisces handles disappointment. Because this placement often sees the best in people first, disillusionment can hit very hard when reality finally becomes unavoidable. Not always outwardly, sometimes quietly. A slow grief, a private collapse of an inner image. The painful recognition that what was felt so strongly is not actually being met in equal measure. And when that happens, it can take time to recover. Because Venus in Pisces does not just lose the person. It loses the dream attached to the person. It loses the meaning it had given the connection. That is why letting go can feel so deep here. Not because it is weak, because it had opened so completely. Now, at its highest expression, Venus in Pisces has an extraordinary capacity for devotion without hardness. It can love in a way that is compassionate, intuitive, and deeply human. It can stay tender in a world that often rewards detachment. It can create emotional safety through gentleness rather than control. That is rare. But for that gift to work well, clarity has to become part of the love. Not less feeling, more truth inside the feeling. Not less openness, better boundaries inside the openness. Not less romance, more reality underneath the romance. And when that happens, Venus in Pisces becomes one of the most beautiful placements in relationship. Because then it is not just dreaming love. It is living it in a way that is soft, clear, and real at the same time.